Welcome to the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of the Rewind. As always, I'm joined by my lore guru and friend, Theric, as we take a look back at the week that was in news, notes, and community discussion around the upcoming MMORPG Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. We have a good bit to talk about this week, but before we get into that, we have to do our check-in here. Theric, how was your week?
Oh, my week was, it was up and down a little bit, kind of some good, some bad, sort of lots of crazy stuff in the world going on. But on the bright side of things, I've been committed to riding my bike for like an hour and a half before I go to work every morning. So I've did that every day this week. So I'm pretty proud of that. So yeah.
Awesome. Getting healthy, staying strong. I like it. I like it. My job is driving me like it's so hectic, and I like it. I actually thrive in that. And I've actually lost like 7 or 8 pounds just from working because like I'm constantly running around. So
yeah, that's good.
I when I first lost a bunch of weight, I woke up really early and did the workout thing like you're doing the before work, and it works really well. But man, it is hard to keep doing when your brain tells you could sleep a little bit more.
I know. My legs are so sore like all the time now, but I'm like, just live with it. It'll be okay.
Yeah, the end will be better. Yeah. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get started. This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. Okay, so we had a repeat Twitter question asking if your characters had a backstory in MMORPGs. So I'm not going to be repetitive, Theric. I'm not going to cover that again. We talked in depth about that. But I will tell you, though, since last time, I've been given a lot of like thinking to this backstory thing. Like,
I like it.
Does the character of Minus need a backstory? And it's funny because I'm so torn on my race. Like I was so halfling at one point, and then I was like, maybe Darkmere, and now humans in the mix, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, nice. I didn't know that. Very nice.
I don't know. But anyway, we do have to make sure we say this if this ever happens. Kilson, you cannot sneak repeats past us. We're on to you. We're on to you.
Not a one.
Not a one. So let's go ahead and jump into the second topic, which was a newer topic. And it's an interesting one because I think it's a really cool question that kind of tells you about the community Pantheon. It gives you like the question itself is whatever, right? The question is, as we draw closer to pre-alpha 5 testing phase, what experience do you have testing games similar to Pantheon? And how seriously do you take testing? Like not a super enthralling thing. Like we're not going to learn a ton of things we don't know. But what's really cool about a lot of the comments I've taken here is that you really get this crazy feel about the community, like the experiences that people have, like the sum of it, right?
It's crazy. I had no idea. People were so like, you will see how experienced people are, but it's insane. I'm totally like humbled by this. Wow. All
right, so let's jump into some of this stuff. So Lexer was one of the first. He said his short list was EQ, EQ2, AOO, Secret World, ESO, WoW, City of Heroes, and Forsaken World, Guild Wars 1 and 2, Rift, Planetside 1 and 2, Killing Floor 2, Firefall, Amphibian, Warhammer 40k, Space Marine, Heroes of Might and Magic 4, Red Faction, Unreal Tournament 2K2, and a few of those he actually got paid for, so he takes it very seriously. That's crazy.
The question should have been for him, which ones haven't you tested? It might have been a shorter list, actually.
Yeah. We have Disposalist next. He said he's been in quite a few alphas and betas over the year, and he actually quoted here that he's a software developer for serious software, which is what I love that.
Grown-up software.
Yeah, grown-up stuff. But have never felt so invested and wanted to help so much. Yes, even when being paid. I'll take it very seriously, though, and I know I'll enjoy it. I wish it was my job. We have Tristan Tayanu, I think is how you'd say that. He said he first beta tested WoW Vanilla back in the day. And since then, he beta tested a lot of different games at different stages, closed and public betas of many Ubisoft games, alpha and beta for this. What is that, Universim?
Yeah, the Universim. I think it's a game that's in development right now.
Oh, that's cool. I don't even know what that one is. He tagged it, so that's cool. And some others that I don't remember right now. Jim McKenzie, who's been featured quite a bit because he's always commenting on the Twitter post, says, I've tested several. The Amiga platform, a football game called Gridiron, a BBS called Atreides Skyline, and a business program called the Microfiche. microfiche filler.
Microfiche filer, yeah.
Filer, yeah. It's crazy. And he said, oh yeah, a little old MMO called EverQuest. I love hearing the stories of people who tested EverQuest. Like, I don't know if anything will ever trump like testing the first one. And I know UO was before it, but it's not the same thing.
Hell yeah, I agree.
Basgrim says testing needs to be taken seriously. If you're not actively hunting for bugs and submitting feedback, you're doing a game a disservice by not making it better. I think a lot of people in this modern day and age, like it's not fair, because I think that the basic gamer these days, because of early access and all the crazy things that are out there now on Steam, and I think that like the terms alpha and beta are not what they used to be. So when a game like Pantheon actually tries to have real alpha and beta phases, I think it confuses a lot of the younger generation of gamers, because like this early access thing has really hurt this open testing stuff. So
yeah, the line is blurred so much between what's early access and what's testing, right? So yeah.
Jorgen Wickstrom, who's been on here a few times, he said, I've done some server stress tests, 1 or 2 closed beta and a handful of open beta. I've supplied plenty of feedback through the bug trackers, typo collectors, and surveys, all ranging from WoW, which is the first time he got into beta, up to NDA. I like that.
That's pretty clever. Yeah.
That was smart. Stone to the Bone says, I've been in a few betas, but I've never really done any serious testing, so it'll definitely be a new experience to me. Nathaniel James had a 2-part one here. He said, I've been lucky enough to help with a few games over the years, several closed betas and 2 alphas. I think there's nothing more important to a player than testing a game. We are the audience, and our feedback is needed to make the game what we all want it to be. As a player, it's easier to think outside the development box and look for ways to bend or skew the rule set, which is important of playtesting. Search the system for things that can be fixed so the launch will be smooth as possible. That's a really nice way of summing up like how important that process is, no matter what game you're testing. So yeah,
one of the things he said there really resonates with me. He said to think outside the development box. And part of my day job is reviewing and like editing and proofreading a lot of lengthy documents. And I know that even if it's something I've written and I've read it 100 times and I'm like, there's no typos in here. I know that for sure. And then I give it to somebody else and they find 5, and I'm like, how did you find these? I was sure that this was perfect. But when it's your own thing, you just can't see it sometimes,
It's crazy. It's because your brain like goes into that conversational mode. Like, because I write very conversationally. I'm sure you don't for things like that, but like your brain fills those gaps in because you know what's coming, right? So like you're thinking ahead. Yeah, it's
weird how you just don't see it.
Yeah. DM Harms says, I treat testing as the developer markets it. And we were kind of talking about this. He says, if they market it as early access, I treat it as such. If they make it very clear that it's in development and in need of intense focused testing and feedback, I swing that way. And he actually said, I prefer the testing side, honestly. Helping's fun. So I like that a lot.
Nice.
At Strieg, he said, alpha and beta tested more than I can list. I, of course, take testing seriously, looking for bugs and submitting tickets. That doesn't mean I don't stop and smell the roses and enjoy the experience. You can test and have fun at the same time. Very, very important thing to note there.
It's kind of cool perspective.
Yeah. Jeremy says, I've tested many MMORPGs in the past. EQ, EQ2, City of Heroes, City of Villains. I'm very serious about testing. I want to find bugs and issues and make the game better for the end product for the users. I don't use it as a play experience in order to get a head start. Moxie vs. Games says, multiple betas for EQ expansions. My bro and I would come up with unlikely scenarios to see if it would bug. We made a list of stuff to try every beta. He found a server crashing bug using a Bard kick and AA kick at the same time. Both his feet are off the ground. Shut it down.
Wow, that's some good testing. Get her on the Pantheon testing team.
Oh, it's so good. It's so funny. That Faith guy, he says, I beta tested WildStar. He's done some New World testing, which is cool. A couple of WoW expansions and ESO. Testing is probably the most crucial part of development, and I spent more time in all those experiences with the bug report menus and surveys open than anything else. Little or big, it's got to get fixed. Josh says, I've been in a few different test phases of games, mostly WoW expansions, Blizzard games, but also EQ Landmark. I forgot that I did that too, actually.
Oh, really? Wow. Cool.
Yeah, I was in Landmark. It was interesting. I'm critical and I take notes, report issues with specific detail and times of occurrences. It's important devs have critical feedback to create a game the community will enjoy. T. Herbert says, I've beta tested EQ, Rift, Aeon, Guild Wars 2, Neverwinter, and Star Wars Old Republic. I take testing more seriously than whoever spell checked this post. I had to put it in there because Kilson misspelled to do or something like that.
I didn't even notice it. Wow.
I had to. It was witty. It was witty. It wasn't, Kilson, we're not trying to beat up on you too much, but you did deserve that because you had the repeat post. So that's why I put it in.
I have an idea. Maybe this is just a test. Maybe this is all like some sort of like next level thing where they're trying to find really good testers. So they purposely misspelled that post.
Yeah, well, T. Herbert, who goes by @Typhon Set, he just won.
Congrats, man. Congrats.
Couple more here. We have Higgin and Minin. How would you pronounce that?
I'm not even going to try.
Higgin and Minin. He says, as a person who tested over 10 games for the fun of it, I take it very seriously and bring 10 years of software Q&A into the mix. I write full test cases when I run across a reproducible bug. It's awesome. See, people like him, those are going to be the people that, if they are part of Pantheon VIP, because we can't say that, Kilson put out a thing to trap people. So he's looking for bug reports and he's trying to trap people who are signed to NDAs. And I don't know who's signed to NDAs. I can't even say if I'm signed to an NDA. But
this post just keeps getting deeper and deeper.
This post is kind of like Red Pill, Blue Pill Matrix. I'm just saying, like the second Matrix when he's in the room with the guy and it lost half the audience because they had no clue what was going on. That's what Kilson's doing here. Viv Wow says he tested Vanguard, or they tested Vanguard. WoW Classic and several others. Takes testing seriously. Found and reported several bugs in each game I've tested. Also enjoyed providing feedback on how class plays and feels. Looking forward to Pantheon Alpha and doing the same. Alpha, so he's good. It's going to be like, no, Viv is just kidding. Papa Zaff says, testing to me is about finding bugs and issues and being constructive about them. Few people in my experience are actually constructive about bugs and helping development. And of course, I had to put in one of my favorite Twitter accounts, Furious Pierre.
Back again. Furious Pierre.
There's so many good things about this Twitter account. The name is phenomenal, Furious Pierre. But I don't know what it is. I love his image.
and you know what else he has too going for him? He has the cheers emoji at the end of his post. And I love the cheers emoji. It's probably my favorite emoji. So
that's a good one. I like the thinking emoji and the upside down emoji. I don't know why that one, but I do.
Those are good too.
So he says that in what great way to end it. He goes, thanks to the testers. I personally hate it. So,
he's going to be close to where I'm at when I give you my assessment of this. But good for you, Pierre.
So I'll give you a quick little rundown of my experience. It's not great, but it's interesting, and I guess because it's a little different. So I've done a bit of testing, but looking at our community, it seems like there's a lot more people out there who have way more experience as testers than me, and that's for sure. I was in a friends and family test for Diablo 3. It was a testing cycle for the very beginning of the game through the Skeleton King fight in Act 1. And I think the coolest part about this is it was way before the game's release, like over a year before the game released. I was able to play that. And I can't tell you how many times I played that section. Like there wasn't a whole lot there, but I played it a million times.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. And, reported some bugs and stuff like that. I was also part of WoW's BFA testing, and I probably gained most of my testing experience during that. I was not able to only test class abilities and bug report, but I also did the limited test on raid bosses during that. So you can actually jump in and we did 3 or 4 of the first tier raid bosses, and I actually streamed it and made some videos and learned some of the different things on various classes. So that was pretty fun. Since then, I've kind of taken part in testing, obviously, for Valere, which is very early in development. I've put a lot of time into bug reporting for that. And I think it's just because of having a lot of direct communication with the developers and having a good relationship with Dr. Greenspoon. I really felt like I wanted to, submit a lot of stuff there. I tested Fractured MMO for 1 day. And I actually did submit some bugs. It's not, I don't know. It's not a bad game. I kind of want to try it again. I guess it just didn't super catch me.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've really have spent a lot of time in my life play testing, but in a slightly different light. So for those that don't know, I used to be a writer for a website called Team Xbox. I went by the name Concept Lost, which was later, it was actually, we were bought out by IGN. And I actually had a decision to make if I wanted to join as a freelance for a small period of time before they could hire me full time. And at the time I had like a really good job and I was like, I don't want to take that risk. So I didn't jump with the team over there. But I was really fortunate to get very early preview copies of games, which I'd write articles about, like the early development of a variety of games on Xbox, even a lot of games that never came out. And it was a really great experience because it kind of lent into looking at games that were unfinished. And I'd say, honestly, it probably had a lot of impact on me because when you're writing preview builds or preview articles, you don't focus on the negative. Like preview articles are a thank you to them for letting you see it. And you kind of highlight what could you be excited about and more so than what the issues are, so to speak. So you didn't really attack them. It was just kind of building on it. And it was kind of fun. It was fun that way. It's similar to honestly how I kind of look at content I put out there. Like I like to take that positive first approach, no matter what it is, you know, if something's not right, I'll call it out, but I'm not going to like harp on it and like have it ruin my day, I guess is the thing I'd say there. And one of the cool things, small story about that, I got press quoted a few times, which is really cool. So like if they sent out like a press kit for their game to like distributors, like they'd have like a document and press quotes and blah, blah, blah. So one of the coolest things, it was Dynasty Wars, and I think it was Dynasty Wars 3, if I'm not mistaken. But I was working as a store manager at GameStop, and the kit came in. It was like lanyards and a poster, like, hey, Dynasty Wars 3. And I looked at the little like press release that was inside, and my freaking quote was there. I had no clue. Like I had no clue about it.
You're validated.
It was so cool. It was such a fun thing. But so like, yeah, all over the place there. But yeah, that was a pretty crazy early part of my life. And it was intense. And there were games I had to review that I'm not so proud to admit, but we had to get the reviews up. And there are previews I did, like I said, for games. There was one that was like a dinosaur hunting game where you had to like go out into like these big areas and like shoot them with like tranquilizers and capture them. And it was actually kind of weirdly fun, but it never saw the light of day. But Theric, what about you? I mean, have you ever tested games or bug reported or any of that stuff?
No, you know what? I'm kind of a noob when it comes to like alpha beta testing or any sort of testing. You know, it's never been something that's interested me all that much, so I haven't like sought it out. Yeah, I mean, your story there is so cool. Like that's sort of like living the dream in terms of like having a connection to a developer or even just sort of being like an industry insider. That's awesome. I never got that opportunity. And you mentioned Valar, and I know when we were playing, I was definitely playing, and you were doing the bug reports because I'm just not used to experiencing a game like that. During the last Valar test, when they did their housing stuff, I really tried to put my mind more towards bug reporting and not just like fooling around with being like, hey, this seems cool. So I actually purposely tried to do a little bit more bug reporting. And having done that, you know, I'm just not sure I'm the right type of personality for testing a game. Like in all my years, I never tried to like find ways to break a game or exploits or anything like that. It's not that's not how I get satisfaction out of a game. I tend to want the best experience to be revealed to me when I play a game. So sort of seeing behind the curtain, doing kind of testing, I feel like I would do the game a disservice by doing that because that's not how I do it. Don't get me wrong. And I have a great respect for people who do provide testing and enjoy it. It's great to see the community is so involved, and it really bodes well for Pantheon, I think, actually. And it's interesting because it's, you know, game developers have been able to sort of make, lessen some of the costs of development through engaging the community more with testing. So it's really been an interesting evolution in the industry, if you ask me. And there's a lot of, you know, bonuses for the gamers, get access to games they wouldn't normally get to ahead of time. Developers, like I said, get that sort of that offset that cost of development. And to bring it back to Pantheon, when Alpha comes along, you know, it's going to be really challenging for me to balance wanting to help VR test, but still maintaining like the mystique of the game, right? So, you know, I just need to focus my testing on one really small area to not expose too much of the game, you know? So like, just stick me on the character creator. I'll find bugs in the character creator and leave it at that. That'll be my area. And I don't want to do anything else. So
just play something you would never want to play. That's the key.
I don't know what that is. I want to play everything though.
Like a Scar I don't know, something.
It would definitely be a scar. If I had to pick one, because I would never probably actually play a scar. So sure, okay, put me in Scargle and let me run around for a while, and I'll test that area.
Scar Rogue, because we know you're not going to play a rogue if I'm playing a rogue, so play that.
No, that's right. Exactly.
All right, well, that's awesome talk. And like I said, I think the cool thing about that topic is just the wealth of, the community's knowledge in MMORPGs. Like if we put that to good use, that's going to help Pantheon so much, not even for testers, just people in general playing and interacting with the community and having discussions. Like the biggest thing I tell people is like, don't be so closed-minded though. Like you got to share this tons of experience out there. You got to be open-minded. You got to be able to listen to one another. Like it's crazy when you look at how much knowledge and the wealth that can bring to players like us. So it's really cool. But anyway, that's it for VR news and notes this week. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into social media and see what the discussion is all about.
Okay, so starting over on the official game forums at Pantheon.mo.com, as we do, there was a topic posted there last week that I really wanted to dig into, but I didn't put it in last week's show because I felt like we didn't have enough time to really get into it as much as we should. It's really strange, actually, because it came up in the discussion last week organically. And so I'm like, hey, great, let's do it this week. We'll dig into it. We've definitely got the time for it here. So the topic is from friend of the show, Nefel, who always posts really great topics. And it's all about the new player experience, or what's known as onboarding. And that was something we mentioned last week, talking about the death penalties and how, this new player experience is going to be and onboarding is going to be really important for Pantheon. So here's what Nefel asked. He said, what are the critical elements of the new player experience for Pantheon? What are the things that it should do for people who have never played the game before? And he clarified as well, like, to be clear, he's not talking about people who are completely new to like MMORPGs altogether. Although he certainly wants Pantheon to draw those people in, he says he fully expects there to be like an offline tutorial or something to move those people into the game proper. What he's talking more about here is what happens once that loading screen finishes and the player takes their first steps into the world. So he came up with some ideas. I think he's got 6 of them here. So yeah. So number 1, he says, player needs pointers to important NPC services like vendors, trainers, or banks. Doesn't mean they need hand-holding or a quest to have them talk to everyone, but they should be sort of pointed in the place where these things are, and it should be obvious and intuitive. Secondly, he says the player needs a reason to get into the action quickly. While a lot of games do this, with simple kill or FedEx quests, I think Pantheon has the opportunity here to put each player into a storyline that helps introduce them to part of the world and their class and race. I'd love to see some originality here and have the introductory content really feel different depending on where or what you are. Thirdly, he says the player needs the opportunity to explore. Whether it's like small quest hooks or having them pass things while they're pursuing introductory content, or even just having NPCs talking about stuff and players like overhearing it. The game should establish itself as being full of interesting and unique content early on. Fourth, he says the player needs an introduction to systems that are unique in Pantheon. So starter areas should include some of the elements like climates or even atmospheres or something like that, climbing perhaps, and just getting those unique mechanics introduced early on. Number 5, he says players should see hooks and pointers for gameplay spheres like crafting, gathering, and perception, but shouldn't be forced upon them. And then lastly, he says players should be able to identify a starting set of progression goals as they take their first steps. So whether that's like acquiring a suit of armor or learning additional spells, they should have players should come out of the initial day of playing with like a list of things they want to do next. So those are the things that Nefel was really focused on. And let's hear what the community had to say about what they think that new player experience in Pantheon should look like. And just a disclaimer for myself here, I had to do a lot of editing. These posts were extremely long. People had a lot to say about this. And so I've done some pretty heavy editing just to keep it in check. So if you hear yours and you're like, hey, I had way more to say than that, I'm not like censoring you. I'm just trying to get the main idea across. But so anyway, let's get to it. Firstly, Thunderleg said he likes bullet number 4. That was the one where Nefel talked about the introducing unique systems to Pantheon right away, and as well as eavesdropping on NPCs. He says, other than that, I don't get the feeling that much of hand-holding is in our future. Ondark said, to me, it's all about the character creation. A game with an interesting character creation has an intense hook factor. More options to be unique equals more motivation to play. Doherty says they offered actually 4 of their own essential elements. I'm going to paraphrase them. But the first one was not having overcrowded starting areas. Secondly was it should be relatively easy to form guilds, and there should be a good guild recruitment device that does not involve spamming general chat. Thirdly, Doherty said we should draw people in gradually to the unusual features of the games. They used examples of like the XP penalty on death, grouping needs for the first few levels, and I'm going to talk about that more at the end. And then lastly, Doherty said, newcomers to Pantheon will expect an interesting story. We should give them one, a very polished starter area where all races start the game. Vandrad said he liked point number 4 as well, and said, I do believe that this point here is the most critical. Having early access to those things that set Pantheon apart from everything else is what will help cement players' interest to continue playing the game. So again, those unique Pantheon mechanics, climbing, perception, atmospheres, climate, that kind of stuff. Renarius said, he had kind of a funny take on it. He says, what? You don't like spawning next to the Priest of Discord with naked corpses all around you? How is that not good enough for you? So he says, now that he got that out of his system, he's not going to disagree with any of Nefel's points. But he did want to add or clarify is that no matter what is implemented for new players, it should feel like a world and not a video game. There's a fine line between teaching new players how to get along in the world and making it actually feel like a world. So like the idea of the offline tutorial is probably good because it teaches you how to play the game without actually being in the world yet. Drenicus said, I've tried a few MMOs over the years, but what always puts me off and causes me to stop playing is feeling overwhelmed with information. And I really like that point, and I agree. One of the main reasons I'm keen for this game is a subscription model that lacks XP boosts and a shop and all that stuff. I find every MMO I've tried recently, I log in, I get about 50 mails, all which end up pointing 100% true towards epic or cosmetic or housing, mounts, all that kind of stuff. Here's what I like how he phrased this. It should have a nice, clean and crisp introduction, introducing the basic concepts of the game done through an interesting lore-filled quest line, in his opinion. All the more better with different starting areas and fresh experiences. Fulton.
I'm going to stop you for that. I never interrupt you in this segment, but that's a great point. Like, think about that. Like, do any of us... Like, I don't know about you, and I'm not sure if it's different in Canada, but when I eventually go get my mail these days, which is rare, my mail builds up like crazy because I live in a community. So I got to like drive to the mailbox. So like, I'll wait for like 3 weeks before I get my mail, and half of it's crap I don't even care about it. Maybe even 90% of it. Like, who would want to come into a game and get, months worth of junk mail? Because that's essentially what that is.
It's 100% what it is. It's the worst. It's 100%. I hate it so much because I feel like I'm logging into like an advertisement after advertisement after advertisement. It is like going to get the mail, and like more than 90% of it's just flyers and junk and crap, like pizza and like all this stuff. Like, I'm like, just throw it away, put it in the recycling bin and be done with it. So like when my games start doing that to me, it drives me absolutely crazy. So
it's funny because it's like getting the mail that doesn't have your name on it. It just says current resident.
Current resident. Oh, that's 100% the worst. I know. Yeah. Or getting mail from like the person who lived in your house like 6 years before, later since you've moved, and you're like, why are you still sending mail here? This person doesn't live here anymore.
That is exactly what MMORPGs do these days. I'm like crying over here.
No, but he nailed it though. He's totally got it right, and that's one of those things that even from a like non-cash shop kind of perspective, like that information overload is it's so daunting. And I'll talk about it later, but like I'd rather feel like lost and sort of confused than feel like I'm bound by like drowning in information overload. So yeah, it's a strong point for sure. So Fulton says tutorials are fine, but just a thought on the idea. Rather than a starter island where you start off doing things and you get bombarded with tips and instruction windows, which I typically forget most of the details thanks to information overload. What if there was I like this idea. What if there was like an information booth or office near the starting area where you can go and you can like browse through the tips and the information at your leisure, right? Like an art gallery showing someone swimming or climbing or jumping, and you can read through the instructions, maybe even click on something, and it takes you to like a small instanced area to practice that skill if you just want to learn the real world. Or you can just ignore it altogether and go out and do your own thing, right? So kind of a cool like optional way of doing it. Counterfletch said, connecting players with others is so vital that there needs to be clear guidance for this. I've quit more than one MMO because I felt like everyone was off doing their own thing and I never had any social connection. So offering a looking for group channel is completely inadequate, especially for people who don't like spamming. We need new players provided with clear guidance on where to go to join a team, as well as telling them that they can be brand new to Terminus and still join a team. So Beaver Biscuit says, Skyrim, I think, did it pretty well. So Skyrim, not an MMO, but he says, I think they did it pretty well, giving you little instructions needed to get away from the dragon. So if most people, I think, have played Skyrim who are listening to this probably, that intro sequence where you're like, you're getting pulled down the path on the card, you're the whatever, and then the dragon attacks the city, and then you got to run, and da-da-da-da. So he's talking about something like that, like doing sort of a storyline like that throws you into the world and along the way teaches you the stuff that you need to know. Zorkon, he kind of pushed back on the tutorial idea here, and I think it's important to get this perspective too. He says, my thought on this is that most of you are really overthinking it to the detriment of the game, actually. So he says, pointers are to important NPC services removes any reason to explore the city. No need to investigate NPC A, B, or C because the game has held your hand and you've already taken you to NPC X, Y, and Z, like saying, here's the bank, the trainer, and where to buy food, and you can now ignore the rest of the city. Secondly, Zorkon also disagrees that starter areas should introduce unique mechanics like climbing or atmospheres. He says, why wouldn't you save some of the things like to be new later on in levels like 15 and 20? There's no need to overwhelm the new player with that all at the same time, right when they log in. Like save that wonderment and exploration for later levels. So he says, I prefer to think about Pantheon is about exploring, asking questions in chat, finding out the hard way, finding out later, and that includes like starter areas. So why do we want to take that mystery away? Faded Emperor says, I think the most crucial part of the new player experience is character creation and the information provided there. Players really need to know where they're starting out, early factions that may be friendly or hostile, and racial information, so bonuses, passive active abilities, and the general class information, so like the group's role or play style. So he's advocating for that. That really is a good point. It makes me think of Vanguard's character creation. I know you were minus playing with Drac the other night, playing some Vanguard there. And if you remember that character creation screen, there's a ton of information about the race and the class you're choosing at that point. So sort of a interesting, before you even set foot in the world, you're getting it from there.
Another game that actually, I don't want to say they do it great, but like also in the character like select screen is Guild Wars 2.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
You have to answer like all these questions. It's weird, but I'm not saying it's done great, but it is different. Like, you're in a street and you see someone, begging for coin, and you have three options, and you kind of build like this character profile that I don't really know that it does anything. But
I don't know if it does anything either. I always wondered that. I've created a ton of characters in Guild Wars 2, and I've gone through that a million times. I'm not sure what effect it actually has.
But it's something different, right? So I don't know.
It's kind of cool. You know what it actually reminds me of is Ultima 6 back in the day. Ultima 6 had a super cool way of creating your character. You're like in this gypsy cart, and she would mix potions based on your answers to like questions about the virtues. You had to decide whether like honesty or compassion. And like, it was really a cool way of doing it, but sort of a sidetrack there.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. So Hokanu says, how about a verbal or written guide to your primary role when you first meet your class trainer? So like if you're playing a DPS class, getting a bit of description about their glass cannon status, how they need to control threat levels, something like that, for healers, what they need to know. Jabir had a really good story about how this went for him when he started playing EverQuest 2. He says that was his introduction to the genre. He knew nothing about what to expect in an MMO. So literally all I knew was that it involved a world with many other players. When my character materialized on what turned out to be the starter island, I just stood there for several minutes looking around the environment while I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. Another newly created character turned up and immediately invited me to a group. So startled, I quickly declined because I had no idea someone would do that. So I began to walk around. I noticed I was attacked by a weak little goblin and prevailed, but I received the XP and a better weapon. The first time I leveled and got stronger by it, I realized that the game was about progression, killing stronger and stronger opponents. And I remember that the next day at work, but I didn't get out of bed till 2 a.m. I was already hooked, and I had yet to discover grouping, crafting, and almost everything else. So through a few quests, I learned my primary objective and set off on the island. So it was not without guidance. I just felt like the game never tried to say, let me show you how, right? I think that's a pretty cool sort of perspective on it. And he says something later on. There's a good sort of quote that I really, really like. He says, the prevalent fear of boring or confusing your audience is a major source of triviality in modern entertainment products. I totally agree with that. I feel like sometimes a lot of game developers are afraid of the audience and just go too far and trying to make sure that, trying to avoid that. I'm not going to say it as well as he did here, so I probably shouldn't try, but very, very insightful if you ask me. Maloka said, the one thing that set Vanguard apart from other MMOs I played was that getting lost factor. I'd be looking for something and completely get sidetracked by the stunning visuals of the game, the territories, and the cities. So while instructions are good to an extent, exploring and finding things out on your own has a lot of merit as well. Even asking questions in and out of character or in shout creates some bonding between players. I remember seeing people starting out asking, how do I use this ability? Where's this trainer? That kind of thing. And then you see them a week or two later and they're 10 levels higher and they're motoring right along. So Jobson said, I think most people are ready to go with any new MMO for like 99% of the stuff these days. It will all make sense to them, except perhaps the climate systems or acclimation timer and the keepers, which I hope are kind of described organically and not shoehorned into some obvious tutorial. I'd go so far as to say trade skills don't need hooks or anything because people will find them when they're out looking around. Asterly said they offered a take on each of Nefel's points and then added their own sort of take as well. What they described, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's like a long quest. They sort of built a quest that describes a very detailed scenario and basically advocating for like this long branching quest that offers you many choices. And each one would be like, what level of instruction on this do you want to receive? So kind of a cool way of doing it. 187 said, emphasize player interdependence and archetype role identity immediately. Most games have a pretty awful early game and that many players will try to blaze through as fast as possible. If the risk or reward spectrum is barely existent when the gameplay can be viewed as a boring time sink for veterans and a pseudo tutorial for new folks, the 1 to 5 experience is particularly awful. I'd like to see players start off with 3 or 4 role enhancing abilities, and for level 1 content, be balanced around characters filling roles in a group. I want every level to feel meaningful and engaging. I think we should scrap the traditional level 1 experience where players have access to a single ability and spend the majority of their time auto-attacking NPCs with little to no agency. We might as well introduce players to a group-focused role-based mentality early on. And then lastly, Disposalist says, while I see the reason for tutorials to introduce players to the game, I think I see more value in not hand-holding. It's tricky, and I'm a firm believer that in some areas, people see social value where it just isn't valuable. But in this instance, I think there is social value to be had. Asking other people how things work, challenge value, making the experience and learning it part of the difficulty, and just the good old fun value. So he says, like I say, I think your character should know what is to do, but we should be very careful about what we wish regarding further handholding. Relating it back to Nefel, I don't disagree with those ideas, but I think VR should be very careful with how sort of artificial that is. So tons of good points. Like I said, I edited that heavily. And I feel like I've been talking for an hour, so you can imagine what it was like reading through it. But I'll give you my take, and it's in line with some of the things that some of the commenters said. I think the critical elements of the new player experience are that which put its unique aspects center stage. Now, people said climbing, atmospheres, perception. Now, I don't think those need to be on display right away, and I don't think those need to be learned right away. They're signature systems for sure, but I don't think they're essential to the new player experience. What I would say is essential is the fundamentals of Pantheon, that being group play, interdependence, and risk-free reward. So sort of like 187 was saying, and a couple other people as well. So traditionally, the new player experience has strictly been a solo endeavor. And I think it's challenging to find a way to make grouping right off the bat even feasible. Like, I think it's going to be necessary to do that. It's like you can accomplish a lot by just putting a simple group task or like a dungeon that the new player has to experience upon entering the world. Because even like people who are, quote, seasoned MMO players, they might not have experience with group-based content, just given the state of the genre right now. So we shouldn't, VR shouldn't take that for granted. And I know people have anxiety about being put into a position too early where they have to group up before they even like learn how to play their character. But I'm going to say that's also actually part of the new player experience is what that should be. It should entail addressing that anxiety by demonstrating what a really good social experience can be, right? So, and just a couple other points with regard to risk versus reward. Should there be some mitigation of the dangers of the world, like early on, like levels 1 to 3? Yeah, probably. Something that doesn't turn the player off right away, so like losing their corpse completely, or so maybe soften the death penalty for the first level or two a little bit, I could see. I'm not a big fan of the signposting or guidance. Like I said earlier, I don't want to be overwhelmed with information. I say just like sort of minimize it as much as possible. Some people do need that, though. I respect that, and I think there's a need for it on some level. So I don't want to, like, it's not about what I need the most. So, and then, as long as the new player experience showcases like Pantheon's tenets, I think they can't go too far wrong. Just make it like more than make them experience it, not just reading about it, but make them experience, and don't copy and paste the new player experience from other MMOs, because Pantheon's fundamentally different from those games. So, oh man, I need to take a drink because I've been talking for a while here. My voice is dying. So, Minus, what's your take here? What do you think are the fundamental elements of the new player experience?
Okay, so I have a couple fun points here, but I'm going to share something really cool. I may have shared a piece of this before, but maybe not in its entirety. So here's how important this is. On September 18th, 2019, I was having a conversation with Brad. It's in my Twitter. I'll never delete it. And we were talking about some things, and I just made a funny comment like, do you ever think to yourself, man, I miss the days when gaming was just for us nerds? And I just laughed. And he responded, he goes, yeah, I actually do. He said, the audience that will try Pantheon is going to just be so much different than EQ or Vanguard. He said, it's really one of the things I'm focusing on, the onboarding process. And he said, quote, for example, people are used to just hyper casual games. And he said, he quoted saying, so we need to ease them into the difficulty of Pantheon. It's interesting because then I responded, it's a tough job. It's unpredictable. And it's just, everything's just changing so rapidly in the gaming community. And he's just like, it can't be just like EQ where you were just thrown to the wolves anymore. So this is something that was really important to him. And without naming any other details, like, I've talked to a lot of people in VR or people who were close with Brad or just talked to Brad from the community. And this was something that he was always focused on. It was something he talked about a lot. It was really important to him that people could play a hard game like this, but not be discouraged from learning. And I think that's the important piece here, right? So it's an interesting thing that he's talking about here with onboarding, because it is super important to Pantheon. It's important to all of us, because even if we don't need the onboarding, somebody will, and it could be someone who becomes one of our best friends. It could be, it's another subscription that keeps the game alive. Like, we have to not think about ourselves as this like really seasoned veteran, community. What about all the other people that need to play this game as well so that we can keep playing it? It's tough. It's tough. How do you not alienate us? And then how do you bring those people in? Because both of those are very important. So little, sentimental thing there. But so here's a couple ideas reading through these that I came up with. So think about it. When you spawn and you're like on top of like 5 more level 1s that just spawned, right? What if when you spawned in like a city or a forest or whatever you did, you spawned in like, there were a bunch of different spawn points. So when you spawned, you weren't just spawning on top of other level 1s. Like, that could be a small little thing that I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool idea.
Pointing you to areas like the bank and such, people said. I sat here thinking, and I think it was Zorkon who made this point. He really made me think about this. Like, what's the rush? Like, if our first day of playing Pantheon is just being lost in the city, is that a bad thing? Like,
not at all.
Right? But like in this day and age, everybody's like, oh, I want to get out of the city. I need to start leveling. I need to get my first pieces of gear. Like, slow down, right? Like, let's slow down. And I'm that guy. I'm the run around and do everything and try to get to everywhere quick. But I don't want to be that guy anymore. I'm fighting back against myself here. So if you spend 3 hours and you're just lost in a city discovering things, it's not a bad thing. So what about this? This was, I think, 187 talked about like, an experience you log into that's like defined by your role and stuff. What if because you got to think of some way that our character's introduced into the world, right? What if, and we're not these big heroes, what if you spawn right into some raid fight and your character has taken a crazy blow, whether you're a tank, a healer, whatever, you're laying on the ground, somebody reaches up and picks you up and your vision's blurred and like the screen's weird and it's fuzzy. And you have like different generals in this fight yelling out like, hey, get that shield up. Get in front, like whatever your role is. If you're a tank, you're tanking. If you're a healer, you're a healer. And like you that's how you lose your memory. You're not this hero. You're just a grunt in the fight of this huge, crazy fight. And, maybe if you do all the instruction really well, like maybe you can actually make it through the fight and survive, but I would make it to where you're supposed to sort of die. But you're hearing like all these generals, like, you know, the another group beside you, a guy yelling like, get your shield up, grab that mob, he's coming in, you know, just like this intense throw into this like war of, so to speak, would be a really cool way to start. And then sort of loading you back into the city is in like a medic office or something like that, to where you're kind of like getting up and they're like, you've lost your memory, but you'll be just fine. And you get up and you're experiencing the game.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. That's what I'm talking about. I think something like that with other people, like if you were put in that situation and there were other people with you right off the hop, like real players, not NPCs sort of thing, maybe some sort of combination of that. Because
it would have to be a combination, right? So like if there were enough people creating characters around that time, because let's say that event is like 10 minutes and you could be put into any part of that 10 minutes, as long as you're going to get a little time in there. So within that 10 to 20 minute intro, whatever it is, you know, if people are making characters, they're popping in, but if they're not, you have NPCs out there that are like at least filling the roles so you can still experience it, especially later when there's not as many people making characters.
Yeah, it's great. And it's a real opportunity to be creative. I think, you know, just an idea like that and take something like that and then, you know, work with something like that to just bring people in. And it's such a opportunity to make it unique and make it fit with what Pantheon's trying to be. So
I have one more.
Yeah.
You know why we're getting all this stuff in the game?
Why?
Because there's no instruction manual anymore. We used to read about this. I just looked up while you were talking, the EQ instruction manual. There's no instruction manual. If there's an instruction manual, there doesn't have to be all this hand holding, but there's no instruction manual anymore.
Yeah. I know. I lament those days, man. I don't need an instruction manual, but I want one. You know what I mean? Like I don't need a big box for my PC games, but I want one anyway. Right.
Yep.
So, that's a great point. Yeah, no. Well, hey, that's what I think that's what my first month in Pantheon might be, is just sitting there helping new people learn what to do and showing them around Fairthel kind of thing. Maybe that'd be what I'll do. So yeah, good stuff. So let's move on. And we only had one introduction to do this week, but that's good. That's fine. This person, actually, I would tell you who they are, but they haven't determined what their name is yet. So they said, they said, hello there all. I haven't determined my name. They haven't nailed it down. I've only had a handful of names over the course of 20 years in gaming. So between EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2, Guild Wars, Vanguard, and several others, I used some names over and over and were on a different name or even on a different server within the same game. So I'm having trouble with the class and race set that I want to set as my main character still, which isn't helping my name selection problem. So this name is good in that for this racing class, but then not for this other racing class. So he kind of goes on rambling a little bit about that and just wanted to say hi and show off that he pledged to the Black Rose level and looks forward to meeting as many people as they can in game and learning about the character and learning about the game as well. So they actually posted over in the guild subforum too, and they're looking for a guild and shared some details about the type of guild they're looking for. So if you are a guild and you need new folks, go over there and check out name yet to be determined. So there was nothing too much going on in Reddit, Facebook this week in terms of like a discussion we haven't had recently. So I'm going to skip that this week. We'll check back next week. But last week, I forgot to mention something. There's a really awesome community project that I didn't mention on the show. And I want to give it a shout out because Andrew Wittes is also goes by Greyjack Gaming. And I follow him on Twitter, and he's been sharing his journey of learning how to do like 3D modeling in Blender 3D, I think it is. And I've enjoyed really seeing his progression going from what I understand to be like basically no knowledge of it and doing these very basic models into doing more advanced models. And last week, what he did was recreate a piece of Pantheon concept art. And it's like an alchemist workshop there's like a desk and there's all kinds of stuff all over the place, like shelves and some of their decorations. And he took that piece of concept art and recreated it in Blender 3D. And man, it is awesome. It looks so cool. And it's just like another example of like the ingenuity of the fans in this community and how it never ceases to amaze. So Andrew, if you're listening, like keep it up, dude. Really good. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at Andrew Wittes. And I think I left a link in the description if you want to check him out. So I'd love to see more concept art or anything Pantheon inspired from you in Blender 3D. So cheers, dude. Really well done. And that's it for this week's community discussions.
Let's talk content creator updates and new additions to Pantheon.Plus. Okay, we're going a little long today, so I'm going to be very quick here in talking about Pantheon.Plus because we have a cool segment at the end we want to get to, and I don't want to keep you guys here for an hour and a half. So we had new content on Pantheon.Plus. Nathan Napalm put out a video called Pantheon, the MMO for Nerds by Nerds, which is pretty funny. So if you like Nathan's attitude and the way he looks at things, he's just kind of talking about how like a lot of stuff's coming from the D&D days and these old school values. It's pretty neat. Basgrim did not put out content this week, but he did announce that he's going to have his 100th piece of content coming out, and he kind of hyped it up like it's going to be pretty special. So we're pretty excited for that. Pantheon.Plus, we put out 2 videos. We finished up our 2-part series of putting the E in PvE for the Climates and Acclimation in part 1, Atmospheres and Artifacts in the second. And it was pretty cool. I think you're going to learn something from the Atmospheres and Artifacts. Almost everybody I've talked to has kind of discovered something.
Because I definitely did.
You did, yeah. So we went through a lot of old stuff and got some quotes that maybe people didn't see. You'll see Joppa quotes, some video discussion around a complete darkness atmosphere, as well as a look at Nashara in the boss fight where he creates an atmosphere. So that's pretty neat. And then our second video is from Theric, which was just released on Friday. He actually summed up key details released from the recent VIP roundtable with JN. And it was pretty awesome because we weren't going to do this, but someone in the community requested it. And Derek's like, no problem. Let's get it done. So nice little 8-minute recap to get you all the info you need. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun to do.
So what's being worked on? Well, one of the biggest announcements was on the 13th. We announced that Drac is now part of the official Pantheon.Plus team. And I just can't overstate like how important his joining is to the team. He's worked behind the scenes to help us test, give advice on new article submission features, is now working with Poiru in our backend tech, Poiru, our backend tech, to like import his content from pantheonblog.com to be a full-time member of Pantheon.Plus. And I'm just super excited. Like he's super innovative. He's super friendly. He's the perfect community member. And having him as part of the team is going to bring so much more content to everybody out there and help us build more content creators. And that's just super important to me. So really excited.
I'm so stoked to have Drac on the team. He's so good at what he does, like he's very talented with what the projects that he undertakes and great writer, great with like Photoshop kind of stuff and just designing stuff. Really, really fun. So I'm so happy to have Drac on the team.
Yep. And then we're going to be finishing up the Putting the E Back in PvE series next week. So we're going to see a Theric lore video based on the atmospheres and dangerous environments in Pantheon, which I'm super excited for. So we'll see that early in this week coming up. And then on Thursday, we're going to wrap up the whole discussion where Militus is going to join me on Pantheon.Plus EU to tie these systems together and talk about what they mean for Pantheon. So I'm really excited to do that with him as well. And the final piece here is we had an amazing Thursday night discussion with Lexer and Pi for a special edition of a live stream for the game Defend the Night. If you like class theory, you like talking about how classes are developed, or you just like getting in the inner details of developing a game, this was a really fun stream. Now, it was about 2 hours long. There was a lot of discussion. It went really fast for being a 2-hour long stream, if I'm going to be honest. But I know that's pretty tough for people to digest. So look for a condensed recap video, like highlighting some key details about each class, probably coming in the next couple of weeks. I don't want to say it's going to be next week for sure with everything we have going on, but there'll definitely be a recap coming for those of you that don't have 2 hours to spend watching. So it should be pretty exciting. And with that, that's it from Pantheon.Plus. Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it gets here, I just yell, mail! We're getting sued. Okay, so following that ridiculous bumper, which I hope caused some smiles out there, we're on to our newest segment I think we're going to call the Mailbox. So we're asked a lot of questions about Pantheon in passing regarding our thoughts on various subjects. And we thought, why not make it a segment on the Rewind? So I do want to thank everybody who's submitted to us via like Discord. We have a channel there. It's #RewindQuestions. And if you want to be a part of our Discord community, join up and you can add in questions there. If you're already a part, add in questions. But if you're not a fan of Discord for any reason, then you can tag Theric and myself on Twitter and ask your questions as well. We're all about community. We thought this was a really good way to react. So we have 5 questions we picked out for this week, and we'll keep an eye on that every week. And if we get enough, we'll throw a mailbox segment in. So are you ready for our first ever mailbox questions there.
I'm so ready. I'm still thinking about that awesome bumper that you made. I can't hear it while we're recording, but I'm really looking forward to listening to this later and hearing that bumper again, because it's just hilarious. So yeah, but I'm ready to go. I've got my questions. Answers all lined up. I'm ready to go.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing too. Like, if anybody thinks I take myself too seriously and I think I'm, not when you do hear a bumper like that. The first question is from community member Gulu Gulu. He said, "How do you feel about raid boss scaling, and will it encourage or discourage zerging content with more people than intended? How would you like to see it done?" He's talking about the fact that Joppa has said many times that if too many people engage a boss, the boss could go away. The boss could just kill everybody. Something really bad could happen. And then there's also this talk of the possibility if, the group engages it, nobody else can. I think all those ideas to me are fine. I don't think you'll be able to zerg. So with the conversation of encouraging or discouraging zerging, I think it's going to eliminate zerging. What's your thoughts? Do you have any different views on that, Theric?
No, not a lot to say. I mean, I'm generally opposed to scaling, any kind of scaling in games. I don't enjoy it. We've seen and heard a couple things from VR about this. I always go back to thinking about that video when the early Nashura fight, when the door closes behind them, right, to prevent anybody else from entering the fight at that point. And I think that they're going to be doing something similar to that. I hope they're doing something similar to that to sort of prevent this problem. But I can see that. I can understand the concern in the question, though.
Yeah, it sounds like raid bosses and certain bosses are going to be designed for a distinct level and a distinct amount of players. So I don't think we'll need scaling because anyone over that amount isn't going to be able to engage by whatever means they do that. So
right. Cool.
JJ Piedra, right? Piedra, yes. Because he corrected. I saw that and I'm like, I'm going to say that right. And I butchered it anyway, but Piedra. What part of the lore do you find most interesting? I definitely start with you there.
Oh, wow. This is a super tough one for me, but actually doing that Q&A recap video maybe helped me answer this question a little bit. The story of each race is just so interesting and so diverse. And, Justin hinted in that Q&A, in the lore roundtable, he hinted that each race is going to have like a perception storyline attached to it. So like, it's almost like you get these 9 separate, storylines to do and to learn about the history of each race. And I love how it's all going to sort of, I think, the lore is going to tie back at some point in the game down the road, maybe tying back to what the ultimate mystery of is, what power brought all these races to Terminus, right? Like that's the question everybody asks. And we always get the same answer. And it's like, I don't know. You'll have to find out, it's like, it's a big deal. So yeah. I love the interconnectedness of that.
Yeah, the two for me are, I really like the fact that a lot of the human backstory is just constant struggle. Like the humans have constantly just been, they've never really stayed on top for long without some kind of major tragedy. And I like that. The humans aren't what you typically see in an MMORPG where they're just industrializing and making alliances and all this stuff. Like they've had a rough go at it. They've been almost on the brink of being wiped out multiple times. And I like that back end story for what would normally be a pretty generic race. Aside from that, though, the Dark Mirror, the whole story of them coming down and slaying the Pantheon that loved them and in the sand, and just like the deep depth of that despair that's kind of molded that class, I've really enjoyed so far. So those are probably my top 2 right now.
Yeah, it's a good choice too. Every time I hear something about the Dark Mirror, I get more and more interested in them.
Lucille, I think is how we say that. On Discord, she said, "What are your thoughts on EXP debt versus EXP loss?" I'll start with that if you want me to.
Sure.
So, I've played both. I think that they're both relevant. I think EXP debt is I would prefer EXP debt until max level. So at max level, if you're going to have de-leveling and you want the sting to be there, EXP debt's not going to help you very much. Because once you're max level, you're max level. And if you're going to get debt, there's not going to be any, there's not going to be de-leveling if you have debt. And I don't know where I stand that I necessarily need de-leveling, but I don't want the death penalty to lessen when you hit max level, right? So I don't know how you handle that. Now, if the game has a system that continues to progress, so if you can continue to get mastery, if you can continue to like almost like AA points were, then EXP debt is fantastic, right? Because you always need to get more experience. I would prefer EXP debt over de-leveling if there's a constant need to get experience forever. And that's tough to program. But again, if that mastery system is supposed to take years to complete and it's going to build on itself through expansions, then EXP debt could work great. So in a well-designed system, I'd prefer EXP debt. I think there would have to be a limit. And I think Lucille actually said like, hey, maybe there's a limit. You can only get up to like 100% of the whole level. So you're only, you're not going to be in debt for the rest of your life type of thing. I think there would have to be a limit on it, but it could definitely be punishing.
Yeah. That's sort of where I would going with it too. It depends on how the debt works. Like, I don't mind debt, but like the thing about debt versus loss, right, is if you have an EXP debt, it gives you an option of paying that debt back some way, right? Whereas loss, it's just gone. You just got to re-earn it. But what if like debt gives you the flexibility to pay your debt back in some other way, right? Is there a class interdependence ability or some sort of technique that can be done? Does it persist, for forever, or does it eventually just go away on its own? I don't really have enough information about how a system like that might work to give an informed opinion about which I would prefer. I don't really have as much experience with a system that uses experience debt versus just plain old loss. So I don't know. Without that information, I would say lost, but yeah, I'm really not sure.
There's a lot in how the game is designed to play into making that decision. But if it was a perfect world for both, I think I'd stick with the debt. Yeah,
like they talk about money sinks, right? Like, could you make experience debt one of those money sinks, right?
Ooh,
is there
buy it back?
Something like that. Buy it back through the cleric in town, like the priest of Discord type person in town.
That'd be interesting. That'd be really interesting. Mm-hmm. Two more. We have Mirth, who said, in EQ, bard spells were always new, while cleric spells were always mostly upgrades to old spells. Which do you prefer? I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, this is a good question. I had to think about this one for quite a while. I kind of like getting upgraded versions. I think this sort of having your spells right from day one as part of your identity gives you some connection to them. And by max level or at later levels, when you've upgraded them over time, getting this better and better version, you've grown attached to them. And when I don't always, in a lot of single player RPGs, they do that to you where you're going along and then you get this new spell that's completely different from everything else. And you're like, I have no idea what this does. And I have no history of using this. I don't really know how to make it work. So I think about from like an MMO perspective, when I had, like I have a snare spell, let's say, for example, it starts out with a very mild slowing effect. But by the end, you've got this snare spell, the same spell, but it's also doing damage over time. Maybe it's, reducing aggro. It's got that sort of effect. Maybe even like enhancing nature spell vulnerability or something like that. I like the way that it develops. And I think this is why I like the mastery system so much, because that's the idea behind it, as far as I can tell. So yeah, I would go with the idea that cleric spells or any spells upgrading over old spells is my preferred way.
Yeah, so I'm actually a little opposite of you here. I think that, getting if I get a spell at level 5, like level 5, I can learn X spell. I think that spell should be designed that it just grows with me, right? Like if I'm get 10 more strength, then that spell should do more damage, right? Like it doesn't have to,
right.
And my level would tie into my stat distribution and my gear would tie in. So basically like, the spell that I learn at level 5 is never going to change, but it's based on stats. So as I grow stronger, that spell grows stronger. So I'm okay with like having a few spells and then like every 5 levels you get a new spell and it's like something exciting. Like, oh, I finally got this ability, or like, oh, finally, like it's a carrot, right? Like I remember, this is a dumb spell, but I remember, was it called Gravity Flux from Wizards in EQ? Like the threw things in the air. Like I couldn't wait to get that spell. It's stupid. It barely did anything good ever, but it was so cool. So just being able to kind of like know you're going to get something cool is neat to me. And again, I think spells should sort of be designed where it's like, once you have it, what grows it is your character growth. So that's kind of where I stand on it. So and with downranking being gone, that you're not going to get like rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of a spell in Pantheon. So
right. That's right.
So last question, it's a fun one. This is kind of just a goofy question, but I really like it. It's from Tech Ninja. And he says, in real life, what are your must-haves for a truly awesome gaming session? He's just saying for fun, like you have a free weekend, you can do whatever you want. You can binge gaming content, whatever you want. What do you stock up in your fridge, pantry, snack drawer? for the gaming session? Do you have a go-to movie, TV show, band, audiobook that you put on in the background? So do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right.
This is a great question. Great way to end the show. And I really like the idea here. So I think about this kind of thing a lot, because when I get like weekends or something like this, I like want it to be as perfect as possible. Right. So this is kind of thing keeps me sane a lot in a hectic day-to-day life. So firstly, we do some addition by subtraction, and I love my wife and kids, don't get me wrong, but they need to make themselves scarce. So it's like, you tell somebody when you're at the bar and you're like, the bar is closing, you're like, look, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Like, yeah. So they got to go off to the lake for the weekend, or maybe even if it's just for like a day trip somewhere. I'm like, okay, now they're gone. Now we get down to business. Now we put on a nice strong pot of coffee. And when it's ready, you pour the biggest friggin' cup of coffee you've ever seen. And then you get that nice comfy blanket out, right? And you turn the lighting has to be right. And then you put on that game you've been really dying to dive into. Sometimes I'll get a little notebook out, a little pencil, so I can keep some notes and reminders and really, focus my my little escape there. But yeah, like, so picture that. That's what I need to have a binge game weekend. I sort of ideal scenario.
Yeah. So I'll jump on the whole being completely by yourself during a binge gaming, without a doubt. That's number one. Number two would be you start with coffee, and then when the coffee's gone, it doesn't matter what time it is. You start with a beer. Probably get a case of Guinness, right. And just drink Guinness through the day. And when you start to feel tired from the beer because you're countering your coffee, you kick in the Monster Energy drink, right, to get yourself back up. Or you just do yourself a solid. You take a nice little nap in the middle of the day. I mean, come on. Like, you pause your game, save it, or tell your friends you'll be back. Usually you don't even go to bed. Like, wherever your computer is, if you have a couch in there, you just crash on that couch right there in that moment of being really tired.
Oh my God. Yes.
And then there's no time to make food on a bit. So you're just ordering pizza. You got it on dial up on your app. You have your favorite order. You just boom, you hit your favorite order and you're good to go. Music wise, put on some Deftones in the background. I don't want to always have it on, but when I need it, I'll have it. TV's off completely. There's not going to be any TV on, no movies. But yeah, man, like, coffee and beer, coffee to get you up, beer to get you down, a little bit of naps, wake up to a Monster Energy drink, binge pizza. You don't eat all your pizza. Guess what? In the morning, you're eating cold pizza. It's a phenomenal experience.
100%. And then Monday, you're rolling into work with the bags under your eyes. You can barely drag yourself out of bed.
You feel like you're going to puke. Yeah.
You're
bad, bloated.
Man, we are on the same page here.
And then you say to yourself, I'm never doing that again. But then when you get that opportunity, you do it all over again.
Oh yeah. That's the life, man. I hear you.
All right, guys. Well, again, if you have any questions for us, whether they're fun ones like that or something about Pantheon, please submit that on Discord or on Twitter. And we'll be sure to feature this as much as we can, as long as we have content from you guys. I think it's really fun. It's a good way to highlight some members of the community and have some fun with it. So, Theric, another show in the books. We went a little bit longer today, but hey, what are you going to do? It's going to happen sometimes.
No, it's not a problem at all. It was worth it. So yeah, awesome.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week on the Rewind. As always, have a great time. And let's steal Joppa's quote, onward and upward.
Cheers to that.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon.Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon.Plus. Also, be sure to follow Theric at PantheonTheric on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.Pantheon.Plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.